Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I am Fiorella.
And Oz is on the ones and twos. How are we doing today, ladies and gentlemen? Fam, you'll never guess this, what's going on. You know, I don't know if you know this, fam. I'm a newspaper guy. So I look at the newspaper to see what's up, because especially with the mainstream media, it tells you everything you need to know what's going on over here. This is something that you called. It says boost for the ruling party, normalcy in Japan vote. Japan's governing party and its coalition partners scored a major victory in a parliamentary election on Sunday, possibly propelled by the sympathy votes in the wake of the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. So what did you say, fam? There you go. You called it. You were Houdini. You predicted it. You said it. It came true.
Wait, I'm sorry. I missed. What did I say? Because the internet was going out right when you were talking.
Oh, yeah. You just said the other day that this vote, this slaying of this murder of Shinzo Abe is going to produce a lot of sympathy for him. And he's going to get a lot of sympathy votes. And he did. It seems like that the fact that he got shot, his party won concisively.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they shot him because of that. I'm just saying that that was going to happen. And I think, superficially, like I said, it would seem like a good thing for a lot of people. But in terms of reality, it got him a lot of votes. Or his party, a lot of votes. So, yeah, fam. So we have a very important show. I want to break down Sri Lanka, and we might have some differences of opinions in that, because I genuinely believe that issue is very complicated. It's not like the protests aren't real. It's not that the economic crisis isn't real. It all is. There are certain people that have always entities that are there to exploit as well. And that always happens, especially in a country like that is living the results of that. We're also going to talk about how much money the U.S. has already spent on the Russia-Ukraine war as compared to the war in Afghanistan. And if we have time, we'll talk about Morocco. If not, we'll leave it for Wednesday. Pasta, you have the Freedom Fest coming up, which you'll be there with, and Misty will be there as well.
Yep. Misty will be in the studio Wednesday morning on the morning show, so she'll be here. And then we have a whole weekend it's not weekend, the end of the weekend, Saturday, of Freedom, fam. Freedom Fest. This year they have 33% more freedom in the fest. But I mean, there's some stupid shit there. Like I said, there are people who have Ukrainian flags in their bio. I saw something that was like a Jimmy Lai kind of like
oh God,
thing. So I mean, yeah, we have that kind of element that's going to be there. We'll see. Hopefully we can get up in Mr. Glenn Greenwald's face and say hi, or Rand Paul, or Andrew Yang, or John Cleese. A lot of people are going to be there, fam. The doctors are going to be there. A bunch of libertarians are going to be there. So we're going to find out what's what. You there?
Joy. Yes. Huh?
You're coming in and out. You're breaking up in and out. I didn't hear the last part.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me get out and come back in. Okay.
Okay.
Real quick.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Guys, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. While Fee is stepping out and stepping back in, I just want to remind everybody, thank you so much. You can always find us over here on the Rokfin, ROKFIM. If you're on the YouTube, go on over to Rokfin. Go ahead and support the Convo Couch. If you got a few extra bucks for $9.99 a month, you can subscribe and be our freaking subscriber. And that means you get all our content across the board for that one price of $9.99, but you also get everybody else's who's on the platform, their premium content for that one low price. So you don't have to buy multiple people. You don't have to buy me, Jimmy, and Niko. You could just buy the Convo Couch and you get everybody's premium content across the board for that one lovely price. And it means a lot to us. So please go ahead and do it. It's $9.99 a month. You can buy a whole yearly subscription for a great price and a discounted price. And we're also loving that as well. If you want to go to our Give, Send, Go, it's GiveSendGo/support the Convo Couch. That's GiveSendGo.com/support the Convo Couch. Of course, we have a Patreon. That's the Convo Couch. and you can help us out there as well. Trey Wright, who's hanging on out. Trey, we missed you the other day. We love you. I was thinking if you hold on for one more, Trey, things will go your way. And that's kind of the theme song right now, is just holding on for one more day. Listen, things are tough out there right now. Gas is through the roof. I mean, there's going to be a tsunami of evictions, guys. All the protections that were in place for the corona when it is pertaining to rental status, mortgage status, they're all over. They've expired. And a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to go back to work because their job is no longer there. So you're going to see a tsunami of evictions coming through at the end of the month, at the end of July, August, September. It's going to be ridiculous. A lot of families will be bulking up, living together because things done got real. So that's what's going on over there as well. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. Fiorella, are you back with us in the building? Fiorella, are you there? Can you hear us? I have my radio voice on. Trey Wright just said to say hi.
Fam.
Yes, fam.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back. All right. Have you communicated with our guest?
Yes.
All right. So who's coming on first and what's it going to be about, fam?
Is it any better?
Nope. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, just keep going. See if it straightens out. They're thinking it's just a little static in the beginning. Who's our first guest and what's going on?
So Kit Clamberg is going to come on and we're going to talk about the behind the scenes stuff going on between this CIA M16 type of intelligence apparatus behind the ousting of our man Boris Johnson, and of course the rise of people like Priti Patel. So
yeah,
we're going to be talking about that.
Fam, if you can refer to him as my good friend BoJo.
Fam.
What, fam? All I know,
that nickname.
If I'm in a meeting of nations, I'm not letting Erdogan come near me. Like, don't touch me, Erdogan. Get away from me. If he touches you, it's like the kiss of death, fam. You're done. You're out skis. Guys, let's do us a big favor now. Hit the like button. Hit the share button. Let's do that.
Okay, so apparently we had a time situation. I thought he was at the same time as me, and apparently he's an hour behind. So he'll come on after we do our two sections.
Let's do it then. Let's jump right into it.
All right, guys. So we're going to talk about the cost for the war in Ukraine. Okay, this is a very and just among other things, right? Because this has just come out. The U.S., by the way, just approved the Pentagon, $400 million more for Ukraine. Again, it seems like every other day they're giving them more money, right? And so now they've exceeded the amount that was spent during the first 5 years of the war in Afghanistan. And this is all, of course, to counter Russia and to support Ukraine via these weapons and this aid that never really gets into the hands of Ukrainians. It ends up in the hands of the Azov Battalion, which then ends up in the hands of the Russians or the black market. We've seen that happen where these weapons are being sold and this money is just being carried out in suitcases. And meanwhile, of course, the United States economy and Europe's economy is in crisis. And we're going to talk more about that. We've been talking constantly about that, right? But here it is. Fox News first put it out, but it was regurgitated by pretty much every media, including MSNBC. And the Biden administration and lawmakers, they said on both sides of the aisle have pledged to counter Russia's war in Ukraine and the threat it poses to European security. And the funds so far committed to Kiev have already exceeded U.S. costs for the first 5 years of the Afghanistan war. And this past Friday, they announced another $400 million in a package. And it was going to be specifically for what the Ukrainians asked for, including these specific weapons for the front lines, like the howitzers and the HIMARS systems, and basically anything that would be needed for the front lines. And slide 9. So since the start of the conflict, they have provided $8 billion in security assistance, which is more, of course, I think it was 7 point something for the war in Afghanistan for the first 5 years. And of course, Congress committed to spending $54 billion in traditional foreign aid and military assistance earlier this year. And yeah, and the funds, of course, are going to go through different channels, but specifically, of course, NATO, US and European troops in via NATO. And by the way, just so you guys know, by the end of 2006, the US had spent more than $7.4 billion in its fight against the Taliban. By 2011, the 20-year war had reached its peak when it spent $11.4 billion that year alone. So there you guys go. We know that Biden and and his administration, the State Department, have all said that they're going to do whatever it takes, as long as it takes, to make sure they can take down Russia.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't understand how the people could just be sitting back and just going, okay. I mean, literally every single time they are fleecing the Treasury every single day and sending more money off to a proxy war, and people put stuff together. I mean, I think most people are like, yeah, we don't want money sent to Ukraine for weapons and whatnot. We have enough problems here at home, but yet they still seem to do it every single day. You turn around, more hundreds of millions of dollars, while we have, 750,000 homeless people here in America. But yeah, go right ahead, send more money.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you're right. People should be out in the streets marching, and instead, they're actually out in the streets in support of Ukraine, pretty much demanding we continue giving them weapons, because that's all the United States does, is provide support via those means. So they had the audacity and the stupidity to march on in DC, of course, of all places, right? This past weekend. And this Jeremy Lafredo was there for Rebel News, and he caught sight of this. So let's take a look at the pro-Ukrainian DC march, fam.
Let's do it.
So I just wanted to reiterate that they're shouting the Slava Ukraini.
Yeah, it's a bunch of liberal white people. Like, if you look at it, just a bunch of fucking like cappuccino people who can't think for themselves, liberal white people. Literally, look at it. Just, I mean, seriously, fucking. I'm sure there's some Ukrainians there too as well, but I mean, you know what I'm saying, for the most part, this is just people playing team sports and doing what they're told. People who can't think for themselves. I mean, just shove up your ass. I mean, I said, Steve told me about that. I'm like, did they get egged? Did somebody throw rotten eggs at them? Because that's what I assumed happened. No.
Right. And again, this is when we said that this is going to be the US's next Afghanistan, we weren't wrong. I mean, this is already turning into that. And nobody wants this war here in Russia. They don't. They want to be able to travel. They want to be able to see their friends and family that live in other parts of Europe, and in Ukraine even. They want the stores back that left eager to send money. I mean, that's just, you know, the troubles that Russians are going through. But are they actually hurting Russia? No, these sanctions are actually isolating the United States and Europe, because Russia right now has the upper hand, has been able to sell their gas to Eurasia. And so Zakharova, the MFA spokeswoman, called out Anthony Blinken, because Anthony Blinken has been going around and telling everybody that they need to isolate Russia. This is the US foreign policy towards Russia, right? And basically, she pretty much retorted with that he's just creating his own tales to justify his lies. And she said this in response to the G20 summit happenings that have been happening throughout. And she said, this is according to this alternative independent Al Mayadeen English news source, but I have her Telegram directly where she puts this information out, her opinion on certain matters. And basically, she said, this is the same Secretary of State, Blinken, who said that anyone who knows the President, Joe Biden, knows he speaks very clearly and very deliberately for himself. It's a joke because we all know Joe Biden can't even read a teleprompter correctly, right?
Yeah,
we should have brought back the anchor man. But we know it's a joke
line.
Because Blinken, I hope to never do that, guys, ever. So Blinken said Russia was isolated at the G20 and that Lavrov left prematurely, and then so she responded with that, and then she said, it is you, Mr. Blinken, who drove yourself into self-isolation by failing to attend a number of G20 events where few people even noticed your absence. Now you're making up stories to justify your own failure. As for us, we have been told how you personally have been asking everyone to isolate Russia. Everyone you have asked is laughing behind your back because they know your administration is doomed to an ignominious end. So she has a way with words. She had some words today. She's speaking on behalf of the Kremlin. I mean, she's speaking on behalf of Putin, and it's just funny. I mean, how she's really much telling it like it is, and it's not just that. I mean, she's absolutely right. Like I said, they're trying to isolate Russia, but Russia's okay. Russia is fine. It is Germany. It is Europe. It is the United States that aren't fine. Bam. I'll let you say whatever you want to say.
Well, it's not just Germany and the EU that's getting kicked in the teeth. There's other countries that are, at the end of the road are going to have to suffer for this as well.
Yep.
We're going to talk about Sri Lanka today and how it's getting affected. But yeah, I mean, I don't understand what exactly they are trying to do. When a lot of people say this is the controlled demolition of the United States empire, I kind of have to say, yeah, maybe it is, because these other countries are holding all the resources, right? These BRICS countries, India, China, USSR, well, it's not the USSR, sorry, it's Russia, the Russian Federation. They have more people and they have most of the resources. So I don't know what you're going to do at the very end to try to pull this out. I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on in Europe. They're all starting to point the finger at each other. I heard there's a start in a removal, a movement to get Macron out. Like that's starting right now. So, we have the X on the Boris Johnson we're going to talk about today. Who's next? They're only putting themselves in danger, and they're only going to screw up themselves, the European leaders, if they continue to go along with this sooner or later. I mean, fam, we're sitting here, we're looking at what's the future going to be like when it comes to, RT America, censorship, that kind of thing. It still seems like they're doubling down on the censorship and they're still doubling down on trying to isolate Russia, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So hopefully it will backfire on them.
Yeah. Basically, what's happening now, and you're right, developing nations, especially like Sri Lanka, are affected by these sanctions and the scarcity of grain and the high cost of energy prices, specifically fuel. And Germany, of course, is one of the countries that is going to be and has been most affected. And this is an article by Glenn Deason, and he basically said that this is what you said for the United States is a controlled demolition. For Germany, it's a study in self-harm. They're doing this to themselves. They don't have to do this. Yeah. But it's happening. And by the way, today, as of today, they're not sending any more oil to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's done as of today. So that's going to exacerbate the situation. And that came straight from the mouth of German officials. And so he writes, by sanctioning Russia, Germany has destroyed its business model. And now it faces a possible economic catastrophe. And it's not possible. It's happening. And Germany just posted its first monthly trade deficit in 3 decades. And the head of the German Federation of Trade Unions has warned that key industries in the country may collapse permanently as a result of high energy prices and shortages. The golden era of the EU's economic locomotive has already come to an end. It absolutely has. And so, they're trying they've been trying to focus the G20 situation by talking about Russia and China being a threat to their national security, but basically Germany and the EU have been more dependent on Russia in terms of that, because Russia, like I said, can go and have Eurasia. They have other clients, and so they're just redirecting their exports eastward, whereas the EU is going to pay more. And so Russia is basically selling at a discount price to China. And so this is very important. Slide 20. This was admitted recently by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who, when he said that the military bloc was using the time since the Orange Revolution into the Maidan coup to prepare for conflict with Russia. They've been wanting to do this. They've been looking for the excuse. And now this is what they've been waiting for. There was a video that I didn't bring up of Zelensky talking about, how they were ready, how they were going to do this, how they were going to go after Russia. And so, sure to everybody, when recognized the independence of Donbass, because they wanted to be independent of Ukraine. That was in February, right before the conflict started. Germany decided to cancel the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and seize control of Gazprom subsidiaries on its territory, and of course announced the sanctions on Russian energy. Finally, now that's entirely stopped, right? And so now they had been saying that for years and years and years. They had been saying, oh, Russia has a stranglehold on poor Germany. They're going to try to, dictate that and control them by stopping the flow of energy supplies to Germany. But it is Germany that did it to themselves. Russia didn't have to do it. So it's funny that after all this time, they've been saying that Russia was going to do that. And in the end, of course, it turned out to be Germany. And so, like I said, Russia can diversify its exports. Russia has other clients. And the United States, of course, is trying to work with Venezuela. And Venezuela is going to, obviously look at what they can do economically for themselves. But they're not going to help the West in terms of actually, helping them. Neither is Iran. And of course, because of the Libyan foreign policy that the United States helped carry out with Hillary Clinton, the destabilization of other parts of Africa, including Nigeria, makes it impossible for other states in the region to also help out and provide the gap that Russia is no longer fulfilling. So this is a huge issue for the West in general. And I think it's important people understand just how big it's going to get.
And this last video?
Right. So I wanted to basically summarize what I just said, and Putin pretty much summarized it really quickly in 40 in his own words on what these sanctions are actually doing and who they are affecting.
Да, мы знаем, европейцы пытаются заместить российские энергоресурсы. Однако результат таких действий ожидаем. Это рост цен на газ на спотовом рынке и увеличение стоимости энергоресурсов для конечных потребителей, в том числе для домохозяйств. Все это еще раз показывает, что санкционные ограничения в отношении России гораздо больший ущерб наносят именно тем странам, которые их и вводят. Дальнейшее использование санкционной политики может привести к еще более тяжелым, без преувеличения, даже катастрофическим последствиям на мировом энергетическом рынке.
Go ahead, Pasta.
No, I couldn't see what he was saying. So go ahead, fam.
Okay. So he was basically saying that the sanctions that are being posed by the West are not helping to hurt Russia. They're helping to hurt the countries that are pushing them. And essentially, that is what we're seeing. We're seeing Germany, we're seeing Europe, we're seeing all of these countries sort of default into an economic crisis. We're seeing much of the United States go that route as well. And that's essentially what he's saying. He's like, they're trying to say that Russia is hurting. They're trying to isolate Russia, but really the countries that are pushing these sanctions are the ones that are hurting themselves. So I agree. It is a form of controlled demolition in a way.
Yeah. You don't have the cards. You don't have the hand. They have all the resources. They have all the people. What are you going to do? Why would you do this? Crazy. I don't know. Anything else, fam?
Agreed. Not in this section, no.
All right. Let's get on to section number 3. See if we can fit this in before our guest comes in about 38 minutes. It's going to be a long section, but it's worth it. There's so much stuff that's going on. Sri Lanka's economic crisis was fueled by the IMF and the U.S. interference. It certainly was the straw that broke the camel's back. I can tell you that much. So what I did was I grabbed this clip. This gentleman was on a couple of the interviews we saw with some of the specials. RT, about a month and a half ago, fam, had an amazing documentary about a half hour long. Howard Nicholas, he's from Sri Lanka, originally educated in the West, is a professor, teaches finance in the Netherlands. He's also taught in Vietnam. He's also taught in China. So the guy has been somewhat of an expert, even though he doesn't call himself an expert, on Vietnam. And this talks about why Sri Lanka is in trouble. And there's a few things he's mentioned throughout the whole interview. He does mention the fact that he was comparing to Vietnam from 2015 to 2019, when he had money invested in both countries, that Vietnam by far outperformed Sri Lanka. And one of the reasons why is because it had a bigger manufacturing base there in Vietnam, where Sri Lanka had a lot of services, a lot of tourism. But as you know, if you're not really manufacturing everything and your whole country's dependent upon IMF loans, you're going to fall into trouble one way or the other, because that's what they want. They want you to be in debt. They want austerity measures. So let's take a look at why Sri Lanka is in the trouble it is in. This is Howard Nicholas, and you'll see him throughout this whole presentation on talking several years ago. This is in 2019, talking about the state of Sri Lanka back then.
You've heard, why do you think Sri Lanka has been unable to dictate terms? If Sri Lanka is so important in this region, geographically, in the region, and if all these countries want a piece of Sri Lanka, want to be a part, why has it been difficult for Sri Lanka to make these terms clear?
Well, simplistically, of course I'm not an expert in these matters, simplistically I would say it's the lack of economic power. It makes Sri Lanka vulnerable. It makes Sri Lanka dependent on loans and access to monies from, let's say, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the aid group. So that makes their bargaining position very weak. I just give a comparative position of Singapore. When Singapore first began its development process with Lee Kuan Yew, they were very weak. They were very weak, but they navigated through troubled waters to become much more resilient by developing a strong economy. Mm-hmm. You know, in the end, that's your ultimate insurance policy. You have to develop your economy and develop an economic power base. An economic power base that makes you less and less dependent on having to seek foreign monies to supplement your reserves or finance your budget deficits. And this is something that Sri Lanka has to aspire to in the medium term. Otherwise, they're always vulnerable to one group or another that will come in and say, yes, don't worry, we will take care of all your debts and we will provide you with the finance, but nobody provides a free lunch. Nobody.
So you can see that he talked about, like, they had a problem with their manufacturing right now. They didn't really produce a lot of things. He also talked about the fact is that one of the differences he realized between Vietnam and Sri Lanka is that there was a lot of red tape in Sri Lanka. In other words, they couldn't authenticate their products to go out and export around the world, whereas in Vietnam it was very easy to do that. So there wasn't any help from the government to facilitate this process, fam, of being able to get out there and export as much as you can. They had a great garment center, a great garment industry, but a lot of that went to Russia and Ukraine. So when the war came along with the military actions, whatever you want to call it, all hell broke down. Now, this was Sri Lanka a couple days ago on Saturday. So we should get you up to speed on where we're at and then get a little deep dive onto why we were here, fam. But do you have any thoughts or on Sri Lanka beforehand? The fact is that they have to depend on the IMF loans for their economy. And if you're dependent on the IMF for loans, doesn't that spell disaster in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, Sri Lanka was also a British colony before, like India. So it's a history of being subservient to the West. So basically the problems that they already had, the economic crisis that they had, the political crises that they had has been exacerbated with the high cost of energy and of course the grain shortage. And so now this crisis that you're seeing, these protests that we're about to see are real. They're genuine in terms of people being upset and angry that this is happening, right? Now, as far as the IMF's sole job is to basically be there to create this idea that the only way to get out of all this debt is to have the IMF give you money and you can borrow money from the IMF. But that's basically like being in debt and like asking, like, taking out like having credit card debt and trying to take out those money from those loan sharks, because you're never going to be able to pay off that debt. You're always going to be behind and it's going to be at a very unfair rate. And so they basically do this to keep these developing nations dependent on them and to be able to control them. And in this case, I believe, and we're going to be going down on that, the United States is, there's a lot of NEDs and NGOs in Sri Lanka, but the ones that there's very few that have been involved in the protests, if any, that I have seen actually direct line, but there's always going to be the exploitation of a crisis to try to get the Sri Lankan government towards the IMF, because then that makes it subservient to the West. And then of course they can also use Sri Lanka as another anti-China buffer, just like they're trying to do with Taiwan and like they've done before as well with Hong Kong. So we're going to be seeing a little bit of that, I think, as well.
Yeah, we'll be getting into all that, who's protesting, what's protesting, because it really is a complex situation. I will tell you this much right now, and you can see the large numbers in the streets. When you're out of fuel, when food is not coming in, when fertilizer is not coming in, the sanctions have sacked you, your hospitality and tourism industry has been shot because of sanctions. All people are going to get in the streets. This is the presidential palace and people storming them. Look at the size of this group over here. Bam, insurrection. Don't forget this day.
Right.
Don't ever forget this day.
That's a real insurrection, guys. But we always talk about, the left always talks about that, like revolution. We need to take. They have never done anything close in the recent times.
Yeah. Take a look
it's
at
possible.
The next shot. The next shot shows you the mere size of this one, fam. Look at the size of this. Everybody in Sri Lanka is out in the streets. Look at the size of that. Is ridiculous. Look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
And lastly, while they're in the palace, fam, we had to have a shot of them playing in the pool because, I mean,
Yes.
This is the presidential palace's pool over here. They're all just chilling out, having a good time. There was footage, fam, of the president jumping on a naval vessel and taking off, getting the hell out of Dodge.
I mean, that sounds fun, you know. And Sri Lanka has a population of 21.92 million people, essentially. So it's not a huge country, but it's a country that's been plagued by a lot of just turmoil for a long time, for decades.
They've had a civil war in 2009, really serious. They had a terrorist attack a couple of years ago. So it's been a lot of crazy stuff that's going on here. This is the last tweeter quip I grabbed. And it said, protesters broke through the front gate of Sri Lanka's central bank, finding out who the real culprit is, fam, the ones who are taking these IMF loans. Here they are going into the front gate of the Sri Lankan central bank. So, fam, now we have to examine why we are here, right? I mean, the straw that definitely broke the camel's back in my mind, and there's a lot of things that they had COVID lockdowns there that really hurt the middle class and the peasant class. It really just fucking crushed them. Very similar to the West when it came to these, small businesses and everything like that going on with the COVID restrictions. But the thing that really, really, I think killed them was the fact that they went along with the West with the sanctions, and they were so dependent on oil and gas from neighboring Russia right around the way. So let's take a look at this clip right here. This was from the video. I have two of these clips from Rumble, from the RTE video, just little clips I thought that were just really, really important. Take a look, and this will bring us up to speed to why we are where we're at today in Sri Lanka.
A set of rules that produces a simple, correct policy. It's impossible to punish one country with sanctions without hurting the interests of others. The embargo on oil from Russia immediately increased energy costs. Sri Lanka isn't able to pay the new price set by the West. And bypassing sanctions is risky. You're liable to be sanctioned yourself. Получилось такое дело, что с одной стороны совпали накопления внешнего долга, с другой стороны высокие цены на топливо и эффект лавины.
But what has compounded it more is the price of diesel has gone up significantly. There is a shortage of diesel even in the United States. There is a shortage of diesel in many countries.
Is there something else playing?
Sri Lanka has no choice now but to actually directly buy Russian oil and gas, in my opinion, and bypass the sanctions just like India is.
After Russian ships were banned from entering ports, wheat supplies were severely cut.
Maybe there's something in the background playing on?
Which immediately undermined the country's food security. Disconnecting Russian banks from the SWIFT payment system has impacted the tourism industry. Today, the Sri Lankan budget is hemorrhaging billions of dollars.
There's something that was recorded with that. That sounded like crazy. But as you see, like what he talked about was the sanctions, right? Like pretty much India, neighboring India, has gone around the sanctions with Russia. They told the United States to go scratch, that they're not going to stop doing that. Sri Lanka played that game, fam, where they went along with sanctions and then couldn't afford the fucking crazy price and the increase of fuel. So now all of a sudden you run out of diesel fuel. Now you run out of, you've already have issues now with the whole, and that's something we can't even talk about today, fam, because there's so much going on when they went away from regular, from chemical-based fertilizers and kind of turned their back on Monsanto. Well, that had an issue because then they weren't able to produce enough crops at one point. So then they were kind of arguing back and forth. They had a non-chemical fertilizer ban from April to like November of 2021, where they lifted that ban. And that whole situation, now you had to import a lot of food. That has caused the problems. So now your energy source is up. You're importing fuel. You can't export stuff now to Russia and Ukraine, where it was one of your biggest markets. And you decided not to go around the sanctions like India. I mean, I can only imagine where a bunch of people in Sri Lanka are like looking at us like, Look at these assholes. They're just pandering to a bunch of people in the West because a bunch of white people in Germany, in Great Britain and United States tell them we can't buy oil from Russia, so we got to get screwed. We got to starve because of that. I mean, it's mind-blowing, fam, the fact that they played this sanction game.
Yeah, and again, this just rings true to the last part of the last section, is what Vladimir Putin said, and what I've been saying, what I think a lot of people here in Moscow and East see is that these sanctions aren't hurting Russia. These sanctions are hurting literally the countries sanctioned, the working people of the countries that are sanctioning, and developing countries like Sri Lanka, and also countries in Africa, like in Nigeria, Ethiopia. There are long lines for petrol in these countries as well. So the poorest people always get the short end of the stick when it comes to war and sanctions, even if they're not from the country being sanctioned. And so they don't care. They don't care that the defense industry, the State Department, NATO, they don't care because they're still making money. And so these countries end up paying the price.
Yeah. A little bit too late, fam. Sri Lanka then asked President Vladimir Putin for help to buy fuel after your country's already been in chaos, after you had already pretty much had to flee. Shortly after he was fleeing the country, Sri Lankan's president says he asked Russia's Vladimir Putin to help his cash-strapped nation import fuel as it faces its worst economic crisis since independence from Britain in 1948. Gotabaya said he had a very productive discussion with Mr. Putin. It comes after Sri Lankan's energy minister warned at the weekend that the country soon may run out of petrol. On Wednesday, hundreds of people took to the streets at the capital of Colombo to protest against the government. I requested an offer of credit support to import fuel, tweeted in reference to his conversation with the Russian leader. Mr. Rajapaksa also said he had humbly made a request for flights between Moscow and Colombo to resume. Because that's another thing, fam. When you start playing the sanction game and you start going and cutting people out, you're also cutting out flights and whatnot. After the Russian flag carrier Aeroflot suspended services last month, we unanimously agreed that strengthening bilateral relations in sectors such as tourism, trade, and culture was paramount in reinforcing the friendship our two nations shared. He added, well, fam, it's a little bit too late. A lot of Russians, and this is something I want you to ask around, because from what I also heard, in Sri Lanka, there was a lot of Russian tourism that went there. Now with SWIFT removal, Russia being removed from SWIFT, Russians can't go to Sri Lanka and spend their money now. I've heard the same problems of going on in Egypt, where Sisi is getting pissed off because it's killing his tourism. And that's what's going on over there. Sri Lanka depend on a lot of tourism from Russia. And now also they cut their nose to spite their face. And you can see what happened. Here goes the leadership of Sri Lanka going and begging Russia after it's a little bit too late to resume friendship, to resume flights, to help with tourism, which I don't even know what they can do right now because they're not with SWIFT. So, Russians can't spend their money there. Completely fucking just crazy, stupid moves that they put themselves in this position right now, fam.
Yeah, I mean, but again, they have been in a crisis before this. They should have, I think they thought, like, unfortunately, many leaders in developing countries, that the West was going to help them in some way, but that never happens. And so now, they're screwed because there's nothing Russia can do at this point, really. I mean, especially after being sanctioned, they can't do anything. And I think you're right. The tourism thing is a big deal because the tourism thing is huge in Turkey right now, because that's pretty much like the only place where Russians can go to vacation. Yeah. Essentially, like that's the easiest place, and it's still expensive to get out of Russia, even to go to Turkey. It's not expensive to fly from Turkey to Russia, but to go from Russia to anywhere basically is extremely expensive when it used to be a lot cheaper. And so again, like that's hurting tourism. A lot of Russians would go to Europe, and now they're not going to Europe. They're not going to Turkey. They're not going to Sri Lanka. They're not going to a lot of places that they would normally go to vacation. And believe it or not, that has an effect as well. So this is all just a result, I believe, more than anything, of NATO and the West's attempt at showing how they can take Russia down. Like, it's just so selfish and it's destroying so many people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like they don't give a shit about Ukrainians. They don't give a damn about Sri Lanka. All they care is a proxy war. Anywhere they can poke the Russian bear, fam, they try to do it. So now with the fact that the country's in chaos, the government is pretty much fallen, the president is fleeing the country, we have to start looking about who's next in line to come and take power. Regardless of the fact that they had somewhat of a friendly government in Sri Lanka where they went along with the Western sanctions and they did what they had to do. The IMF loans, they played that game, whatnot. The United States is going to be prepared to try to go in there and get their own patsies back inside there, their own type of government. That's what's going to happen right now. This situation reminds me a lot of what happened in Egypt. It also reminds me a little bit what happened in Ukraine, except I think in this particular situation, the groups are more fragmented, that you have a bunch of different groups. This shows you in this next clip how everybody's participating in this protest, whatnot, how it's affecting everybody from the farmers to the cab drivers to the restaurants. Every single aspect of Sri Lankan culture and environment is now under attack. So we have to pay attention to who's coming out of this with the power and who's going to control Sri Lanka in the very near future. Take a look at this video.
Police are holding the line, and serious clashes may begin any moment.
You can see there's a person, he's a farmer, he came from Dore district to Goldface. There's nearly 250 kilometers. He came by foot, he demanding fertilizers. We are in a deep economic crisis, no gas, no fuel, no electricity, no medicines, no food. You can see every age group in this struggle. There are children, there are youth, there are elders, all the people. Because our export team market, our export team market, the main buyer is Russia and Ukraine, and they are importing products to the Sri Lanka. So that's market is losing from us. So it's been effect for our foreign exchange, foreign currency market. The European Union and the NATO and the America also should be responsible for this economic crisis in Sri Lanka. They should be responsible for this.
They just close their eyes.
Yeah, they are like deaf people. They are like. Some people come here and they resist because they can't pay their children's tuition fees. Some people they can't pay medicines for their fathers and mothers because just a few days ago government raised the medicines price by 40%. That's how this economic trouble is. That's how big this economic trouble is. In one side, the fuel prices is rising just like rockets. Before 2-3 weeks ago, the fuel price was like 220. Now it's 330. That's how inflation is now in country. Now we are in third in the world in inflation. Now this is currently I am full time in this struggle. I know we can win this fight. We will overcome these issues. Someday we will win this fight. Definitely win this fight.
The leader of the Youth for Change movement always carries a red flag. The hammer and sickle symbol isn't just a reference to the Soviet Union, it's also about social equality and justice. A protest against the monopoly of US financial capital and certain government officials who are criticized for allegedly holding passports of other countries.
They are citizens of America, they are Americans, but they are ruling our country, they are stealing our money. This country is ours, not American people's. How can American people's ruling 20 million people by only one family?
So you see, fam, that they're, I wanted to show you boy with the hammer and sickle, whatnot, because there's movements out there. There's class movements, there's worker movements. However, the United States is going to have their finger in, on the in the game too as well. They're going to start setting this whole kind of like this information warfare, right? And what they've been trying to do is try to put this like anti-China rhetoric out here. Here's from the standard. China used a debt trap diplomacy to gain control over Sri Lanka. Think tank. And here we go again, fam. It's just, you know what I'm saying? I think that China owns close to 10% of the Sri Lankan debt. I think Russia owns 10% of the debt, and the rest is owned by the West. So 20% is owned by Russia and China, and 80% is owned by the West. But yet they're putting it out there. Well, you got to put that picture out of Xi Jinping out there. And here we go. China employed its devious debt trap diplomacy to gain a strategic edge over Sri Lanka, an independent foreign policy think tank said on Saturday after Lankan Prime Minister Ranil, something with a W, resigned, making way for all party candidates to assume control of the country. In response to Sri Lanka's financial crisis, China employed its devious debt trap diplomacy to gain strategic edge over the Asians and hold its economy hostage. The port cities of Hambantota and Colombo have been leased to China for 100 years. China is now the second largest leader to Sri Lanka, holding more than 10% of Sri Lanka's outstanding foreign debt in 2019. Red Lantern Analytica said in a statement. It added that Sri Lanka has fallen part of the country because of the economic disaster caused by the poor governance, lack of transparency, and fam, are you ready? Chinese debt trap and corruption.
Right. And I have a little bit more I added on that because it's entirely false. They basically are owned by Western investors. And I'm going to go over the list as to who those investors are. It's the usual suspects. The usual suspects. It is not primarily China, but like I said earlier, they're going to use this to try to get Sri Lanka to be anti-China. Neither the governments that are running for office, who are going to be the possible ones that take over, they're not anti-China or anti-Western governance, and neither is the one that's currently in there. They were kind of playing both sides. Yes, they accepted the IMF. Yes, they accepted to work with the U.S. and follow along the sanctions and stuff, but they're not. They weren't anti-China by any means. And so basically this is another attempt by the West to say, oh, China is doing this to these poor countries. And so the Belt and Road Initiative must be stopped because that they told us that this is their foreign policy. This is going to be the Western foreign policy towards China and Russia, particularly China, to stop the Belt and Road, which was is a threat to their national security, but they mean that it's a threat to them having unilateral control over these developing countries. And you mentioned our girl.
Yeah.
Wherever she goes,
you got to watch out.
Fast.
Yeah. Because we know, fam, that they're going to try to get in there and get their grubby paws on what's going in. Just at the end of March, U.S. Undersecretary Victoria Nuland arrives in Sri Lanka, fam. I think Oz said before the show, why don't they just hit her out of the air shaft? Send her off. The Undersecretary for Political Affairs of the U.S. Department of State, Victoria Nuland, arrived in Sri Lanka for a 2-day official visit evening. Accompanied by the delegation of 5 senior officials, Nuland arrived in International Airport in another area at around 7:30 p.m. today from New Delhi, India. So she went from India right into Sri Lanka. Newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, accorded a warm welcome to the U.S. Undersecretary upon her arrival. Secretary Nuland oversees regional and bilateral political issues on U.S. Department of State. During the visit, Undersecretary Nuland is scheduled to call on President Gotabaya, meet foreign ministers, and also a couple other elected officials on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when she went there. And this is what happened, fam. I heard that she didn't give out cookies like she gave out cookies on the Maidan in Ukraine. So we haven't heard any words about cookies. But as soon as she shows up, you have to start wondering what seeds are going to be planted. We saw what happened in Ukraine in 2014. Here's some information, fam. This is we got this from this gentleman over here who sent out a tweet doing some coverage over there. On the left, symbols of the colored revolutions of the world. On the right, that of the current revolution in Sri Lanka. Victoria Nuland visited Sri Lanka in March 2022. The former premier who resigned in May of the powerful Rajapaksa family was pro-China. So they got it out, fam, and here we go. It seems like they already have some of their seeds planted, fam. They're going to try to get some movement for a color revolution. That's what happens. You can always have a part of the country that is really not informed, doesn't have the information. So if they can be pointed to China bad, Russia bad, then all of a sudden they're going to start a movement. So we have to be prepared and watch out for a movement, another color revolution movement that has been started and funded in the Ukraine, in Sri Lanka as well. We heard that USAID is there. So there's a lot of cause for concern, fam, of what the U.S. is going to try to do. They might be losing power with their puppet right now, but they're going to try to get their people back in office in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, they're going to try. But there's been a lot of people that have been looking at this wrong and doing very surface level analysis and in terms of just saying, oh, this is a color revolution, fully, just a color revolution. No. Because it's real. Like the economic crisis is real. Everything that's going on is real. The protesting is real. The different factions are real. The complexity lies at these cutouts, these CIA cutouts like the USAID and the NED, and these NGOs are all there. But there hasn't been one that's really involved right now with the actual protests themselves. The protests are being organized by people, of course. In every protest, there's going to be money involved because in order to organize a protest of that magnitude, you're going to have money, one way or another. Did you already talk about this slide?
No, not at all. The one that's up there, yeah, we talked about that when we showed the symbols for the color revolutions and the fist and everything. And you're right, fam. I just want to say something. Like, you're right. There are so many different groups out there right now. So many different groups. So of course they're gonna fund some backdoor groups and whatnot. But this is not just like what people are saying. Oh, cut and dry. This is a color revolution. USA
right
there. It's like, no. We just kind of explained what happened in Colombia. That they have all these NGOs there. You have to work around them. They're going to be there in Sri Lanka too as well.
Yeah. I'm getting really sick of this. I don't know how this has come about. But just like, oh, there's a USAID there. Oh, that means the whole thing is no, that's not how it works. There's so many complexities, and I'm no expert on Sri Lanka, but at the same time, all you have to do is do a little research to know that there's so many complexities that go into these countries and historical context to really understand as to why you can't just say, oh, this isn't real. What those people are going through is real. What they're protesting is real. So it's not a color revolution. It's not like it was in Hong Kong. That's what I would consider the definition of a color revolution, where they literally you could see direct money ties to the creation of these protests. These protests are happening close to spontaneously in terms of out of need, but obviously they're going to be funded by groups of people who come together, whether it's, a mutual aid groups or whether it's organizations. And can these organizations get co-opted? Absolutely. Will there be organizations that get co-opted? Absolutely. Because it is too big. Because then you have movements like that. It always happens. Now, I wanted to talk about this because as Pasta mentioned, China owns only about, or 10%. Sri Lanka owes only about 10% of its debt to China, right? And so this comes from DW, this article. They were talking about how a few years ago, Sri Lanka had a booming tourism industry and promising infrastructure projects that made global headlines. And now the country is broke. What went wrong? And they talk about, this is a population of nearly 22 million, plunged into deep economic crisis, more than 50 billion in external debt, a shortage of foreign exchange reserves, struggling to pay for its imports, its essential imports. Obviously, this has been exacerbated, like I said, by the oil and grain shortage. And obviously, they've had a sharp increase in essential commodities like rice, fuel, and milk. And of course, they've been suffering through power cuts, right? 13-hour power cuts. But you guys can see here in the same article Sri Lanka's foreign debt summary as of the end of April 21st by major lenders in million US dollars. So 10% China, okay? Japan, 10%. The rest of it, sans India, is essentially these Western borrowers. The Asian Development Bank isn't Asian. It's a Western entity. It's just a location.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an Asian type of stakeholder. So you guys can see here, they say, and this is the source is Asia Nikkei, and bondholders will also be stakeholders. By the end of 2020, a year into Gotabaya's term, the country's foreign debt was 38.6 billion. I think this is from April. And the accounting for 47.6% of the central government's total debt, according to the IMF. International sovereign bonds made up the largest share at $14 billion. And that was followed by 8.8 billion in loans from multilateral lenders and 6.2 billion in bilateral debts. The top 20 ISB holders included BlackRock, Alliance, UBS, HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, and Prudential. This is according to the Advocata Institute, a Colombo-based think tank. Colombo is the capital of Sri Lanka. So this is a think tank that is in Colombo that is saying, okay, these are the facts. Their money, their debt is to Western companies, and the most powerful Western companies like BlackRock, guys. This isn't China. This isn't China. And I hate it when people are like, oh, you're just defending China. No, you can see the chart for yourself. This is a mainstream media website, DW. You can see the chart for yourself. 10% to China. The rest you can trace back to Western or pro-Western entities, including the ISB holders.
Yeah. Do you know that it's so ridiculous too as well that Pakistan is about at the same spot where they're about to falter and fall, right? The IMF has been dragging their feet. Even after they got their guy in and you removed Imran Khan, China just gave them another loan out of the blue because the IMF is dragging their feet just so they can survive another month, right? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I know when China looks at these situations, if they see these countries fall, it's going to hurt them. They want them to succeed as countries so they can further develop their projects, their Belt and Road Initiative and stuff like that. So it's ridiculous when people go, oh, no, this is why you're just defending China. Like, China doesn't even own all their fucking debt. They own 10% of their foreign debt right there.
Right. And there again, like, China isn't perfect in terms of certain relationships and certain exploitations that are happening in like parts of Africa. But when it comes to the relationships that are developed economically, that I've seen in Latin America, that we've seen in Nicaragua, that we've seen already happen in Bolivia, there is more of an equitable relationship to actually change the infrastructure of the country, to better the transportation systems, which Bolivians themselves can tell you. People like Camilla who live there and have seen like the efforts of this relationship come together can talk about that at length. And so what the NEDs do is pretty much give the facade of helping out, but they don't do anything. It's like saying we're going to help homelessness by putting this money forth for homelessness, but the money never gets there. So it's two completely different types of relationships, which is why a lot of these countries in the global south are choosing to work with China rather than the United States or the West. So this guy named Nishan Demel is an economist and executive director of Verite Research. And Verite Research is the NED that has seen
the NGO
just commenting. The NGO that has seen talking about the protests, right? And this sort of organization, and you can go to the next slide here. You can see it, Verite Research, and it's in Sri Lanka. It's in Colombo. It's in the main street. And basically, this is how they label themselves: an interdisciplinary think tank that provides strategic analysis and advice to governments and the private sector in Asia, aims to be a leader in the provision of information and analysis for negotiating and policymaking in Asia while promoting dialogue, education, development, blah, blah, blah. So basically, it's an NGO, right? And the guy from this NGO has been talking about the protests. He's not, I went through his Twitter and he's not really anti-China, but he's also, they're pushing basically, there's the current government and there's several opposition parties, right? One of the opposition parties that this NGO has been backing is this guy, M.A. Sumanthiran, who gave a speech, right, at the Colombo Port City Economic Commission bill. And he's basically extremely anti-China, and he belongs to a small party faction. And so there's this guy and a few others who are going to be competing to be the replacement to the current government. And so what remains to be seen is that who's going to win, because obviously the West is going to push for the more anti-China guy, which is this guy. You can see what he said. He said you wouldn't even consider a federal arrangement something that exists in almost 100 countries in the world, but you have given away part of what you claim to be Sri Lanka to be part of another country. You say so much about Elam, but this is Elam. This is China. This is Elam that you are enacting on your own laws, but when you don't have jurisdiction over that territory, but declaring it, gifting in your territorial waters a land mass to China, and you will reap the consequences of this injudicious act of yours very soon. So he's talking to the current government that was in charge, that was just pushed out. And so basically he's saying that government gave everything to China. He's touting the same type of foreign policy, that China is this, that China is the one that they owe all their debt to. That's not the case, but this is the guy to watch in terms of if this guy replaces the current government, it's basically going to be an anti-China, U.S.-backed NED, not just any not NED, but
NGO.
It's U.S.-backed, anti-China, completely IMF-funded type of government. It's going to go back to what it was, because this guy just pretty much regurgitates the same type of foreign policy.
Yeah.
So,
it's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen, because, you know, they can't just go return to the same thing they're doing because it's sacked the country so badly, whether it's just an uprising. But it's going to be interesting to see the way out. I don't think the United States is going to let this go. They're going to try to get their grubby paws involved and get in there. They have too much interest. You know, you can see BlackRock owns the whole fucking place, not China. So this is going to be an interesting situation to follow.
Yep. And I'm just checking with our guest. Give me a second. I got to get him the...
Guys, I'm going to read the super rays while you do that real quick. We have 2 super rays over here on the Rokfin. Trey Wright. Thank you, Trey Wright. We love you. Hey, Pasta Fee, did you guys see the amendment that Karen Michael Moore presented to Congress today to repeal and replace the Second Amendment? What a freaking joke. It's hilarious, though. Worth a look. And that was from Free Thinker. I did not see that. They tried to do something with the Second Amendment. Holy shit. An amendment to repeal and replace the Second Amendment. All right. I'll look into that another time. But thank you so much, Free Thinker. I'll take a look at it today. And thank you all who came on over to the Rokfin to help us out. That means a lot to us. Thank you all to hanging out on the YouTubes. Jilly Love holding it down with the rest of the crew over there. We love you guys. Do us a favor. Get over to the Rokfin, Rokfin. Sign up for the Convo Couch. Help us out. It means a lot to us. We can sure use your help and your love, fam. Have you heard from Kit?
Yeah, Kit should be coming on very soon. Yeah, guys, there's a lot on Sri Lanka that I think is important that we talk about, because I think it just shows you how far the effects of this supposed just poking the bear on Russia, this bullshit affects so many countries. And it really made me sad here seeing that documentary, you know, where they're like, calling out Americans because they're like, America needs to do something about this, because I mean, again, they're the ones that really, the government, right? And it's like, yes, it's the government, but guys, we need to be more aware of what your government is doing and not just focus, on, I know our domestics suck right now in the United States, but I mean, yeah, I mean, these people don't even have food. Like, I mean, this is bad. And until it actually happens, I think, to people at home, I don't think they're going to see the foreign policy aspect of it, because there's so much that is just so out of range, I think, especially when you don't leave your house or when you don't leave the country. Like, once you leave the country, you start seeing how the rest of the world has to live.
Yep.
And how we're so spoiled, especially when you go to even when you go to Europe, a European country, we're still spoiled. I mean, just the size of our cars, the size of our houses, the size of everything. So it's definitely, I say this right now, it might not be the best time to travel, but if you can travel, do it, because there's nothing like seeing other places to really gain perspective. And we have our guests here right now.
Yeah, fam. If you want answers about BoJo, you got to go to the guy who knows BoJo. You got to call up Pitt Clarenberg to get the answers on what's really going on over there in Great Britain. Kid, how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Okay.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, there you are. Okay, great. So I gave Kit, I said we're going to ask some of these pasta. I told him we were going to ask some of these questions, but feel free to add your own. Kit, you wrote this article for the Gray Zone recently, and I wanted to have you on to discuss, because obviously shortly after you wrote this, Boris Johnson resigned. And you wrote about this sort of behind the scenes M16-like intelligence apparatus, this cabal working within the sort of right-wing intelligence working within the government of the UK, within the conservative realm, sort of helping Priti Patel to neutralize environmental enemies and what they consider enemies, but they're environmentalist enemies, so to speak. And this cabal turned on Boris Johnson. And when you wrote this, it wasn't a certainty, but now it is. So he has stepped down, and many are saying that Priti Patel is going to replace Boris Johnson, to the very, very disdain of many British people of the UK. And I just wanted to start off by asking you to give us a rundown on who is behind this right-wing shadowy cabal that's using M16 style intelligence operations against these environmentalists.
Yeah, sure. I mean, essentially, this is a clandestine nexus of former high-ranking military and intelligence officials in the UK, who, yes, they are kind of led by Richard Dearlove, who was the head of MI6 in the lead up to the war in Iraq, and was personally responsible for peddling, the incredibly damaging lies about Iraq's possession of weapons of mass destruction, which are absolutely pivotal to the launching of that, criminal war of aggression. But so essentially, in my most recent article on their exploits, I mean, I urge everyone to read them all, because they are excellent. But essentially, we revealed that Priti Patel has, in secret, been running a leadership campaign behind the scenes for quite some time. This is, at the time, it was somewhat a bombshell, because she's seen as an arch Johnson loyalist, and who she was, encouraging people, encouraging conservative lawmakers not to vote against him in a recent vote of no confidence, which, funnily enough, that vote of no confidence was most aggressively argued for by a number of individuals who crop up in emails with members of the cabal. So whether they were being pushed to do this, is an open question. But yeah, so she has. Patel has now announced her candidacy. She is an absolutely terrifying figure. I mean, maybe in US political terms, she would be, somewhat moderate. But yeah, I mean, she has some incredibly, far right, borderline fascist views on an enormous number of issues. She is running as the quote unquote only authentic Brexiteer in the race, which is. I think that this is, that was one of the things that undid Boris Johnson, was because he, he ran on the promise of delivering what would effectively be a Singapore on Thames, that, that Britain would be this zero regulation, zero tax, heavily financially dominated, kind of playground for rich people. I mean, on top of the fact that that's just not particularly feasible, given the the way the UK works politically or economically. It was also just economic suicide. So recently the government was forced to acknowledge that their quote unquote oven ready Brexit deal is unworkable and needs to be renegotiated. And I think that but the cabal in particular had this kind of absolutely fanatical determination to get out of the EU at all costs. And purge all UK legislation of the vaguest trace of European influence. And yes, I mean, in furtherance of Britain, kind of reclaiming its imperial might, which is again, never going to happen. So, I mean, I think that yes, that they were pivotal to getting Johnson's Downing Street. They gave up on him when it was clear he wasn't going to deliver what they wanted. And Patel seems like someone, by token of being insane and also quite stupid, who they can now manipulate. So, a member of the cabal, Gwyddion Prince, met with her in February. This is never been acknowledged publicly. I mean, it was be a breach of the ministerial code to have done this. And yes, they discussed running a hostile counterintelligence operation targeting environmental activists, green lobbyists, digging up sexual dirt on them, exposing them as Chinese agents of influence. I mean, again, it's a kind of zany stuff, but I mean, Patel, for her part, seems to have been rather moved by this in the best way, and she expressed a desire to keep in contact with the Prince and other cabal members via a dedicated proton mail, which is really, really quite extraordinary, and again would be a breach of the ministerial code. So yeah, it's unsurprising that she's running. I think that, I mean, she could well swing it. It's difficult to know. None of the people, apart from Rishi Sunak, and even then it's small, like have much of the way of, kind of standing with the public. They're not popular. There was recently a poll published where it was, people were asked, who would you want to be the next Conservative leader and thus the Prime Minister? And it was almost 50% said don't know, or no one who is listed as a potential candidate. So yeah, I mean, I think that whoever comes in as well is going to be in very, very deep trouble, because I mean, much like in the US and other countries in Europe, inflation is through the roof. There is a collapse in living standards, massive surging increase in the cost of living and energy prices. People are having to choose between eating and heating. The magazines are publishing guides to how you can, feed your children cheaply. This is all because of sanctions on Russia, which were meant to spell the end of Putin, but seem to be, taking down European leaders one by one, like so many dominoes. And so, yes, whoever comes in is going to have to face, potential, economic collapse and crisis, mass demonstrations and protests, and, the likely, termination of the war in Ukraine. We've just had the announcement that Ukraine's going to launch this massive counteroffensive to reconquer the south with 1 million people. I mean, I don't think they have, a million people who could use a handgun left at this point. So yeah, I mean, yes, there's a congruence of crises which is coming. Something wicked this way comes.
Yeah, it seems like that's going to be the last push to squeeze the United States Treasury dry. Try to get one more big push over there. We need an extra, let's get an extra $12 billion for this last push for them to regain the South, which we know is not going to happen whatsoever. I mean, but we had situations in the United States, Kit, where Kathy Hochul replaced Andrew Cuomo. And we were like, can we get Andrew Cuomo back? I mean, Naftali Bennett replaced Netanyahu, and people were like, can we get Netanyahu back? I mean, it seems like we might have another situation over here with Boris, where if it's someone like Priti that gets in there, we'd be like, yo, can we get Boris back? But what does this actually mean for the Tories moving forward? We understand that the Conservative Party, the Tories, have to find a Tory to replace the Prime Minister this time. What does this mean for the party moving forward? Is there any chance that Labour comes back or another party comes out of this looking pretty decent?
Well, I mean, Labour's sole proposition is that we're not the Conservatives and that their leader Keir Starmer is not Boris Johnson. So, I mean, automatically, like 50% of their offering to the public is now out the window. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there are calls for Boris to come back in short order. I mean, I've heard talk that there are some of his loyalists in the party do think that he, much like Churchill, who was elected after losing an election, that Boris will be back in due course. I mean, I think that the Conservative Party is in a terrible difficulty because they are stacked to the gills with completely insane people who have very, very, very strange views on things, and yes, are extremely corrupt and corruptible, and owe far too many people and far too many vested interests money and favors at this point. And one of the kind of key Faustian bargains is obviously with the defense industry, much like the USA, the UK has been pumping Ukraine full of weapons, much of which seems to have been destroyed almost immediately upon arrival, or indeed sold to the Russians on the black market. Really quite insane that this keeps on carrying on, and no one's kind of urging a bit of caution and restraint in sending unaccountable shipments of killing apparatuses. But so I think that Liz Truss has already said that she will effectively support a direct UK military intervention, which is effectively calling for World War III. I think that there's going to be an awful, much like in the Republican primaries, there's going to be a lot of kind of attempts to out-hawk each other on this issue. Again, it's a losing proposition. I mean, like there are governments in Europe which that have most kind of aggressively or lavishly supported Ukraine are collapsing. Like in Germany, they've lost their 30-year consistent trade surplus. Inflation is well into the double digits. There's also this absolutely ridiculous and horrific scandal that's just erupted, where it's been reported that a number of people who attended a party led by the ruling coalition were date raped. It's just absolutely extraordinary. So I mean, I think that we were told that these sanctions would be the end of Putin and the balkanization of Russia. I think is actually going to be the end of a lot of European governments. And yes, that Boris Johnson is just the first of many to come.
Yeah. By the way, really quickly, before Fee says anything, I don't know if you know this, Kit, but we got the Democrats trying to out-hawk each other now in the United States. Not one single Democrat voted to cut the funding to go to Ukraine for weaponry. Just not one single friggin' Democrat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like, I mean, you have a situation now where, like, Henry Kissinger is regarded as a dove on this stuff, and yes, like, some lunatic pacifist with crazy ideas. It's a very strange world we're living in, isn't it?
Yeah, and so my question to you is, it seemed like Boris Johnson was on the right track in terms of being a hawk. He in his departing speech, he basically was promising Ukraine that they will continue to support them and do whatever they can for the people of Ukraine before he even addressed the people of Britain. So why Boris Johnson? Why was he like the fall guy? Why did they choose to get rid of him? Is it because he was such a disliked, very Trumpian-like type of political figure? Or is it just because, he was just the right person to just get rid of? Like, what exactly was the reason to turn on him when he was pretty much in line with, not just the conservatives, but also with the World Economic Forum? He was just at the summit. I mean, he's pretty much done everything that they wanted him to do, except he's just more crass about the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that much like Trump, like he's an unwanted, an unknown quantity and thus unwanted on that basis. I mean, it's been quite clear for some time that the security services have it in for, the intelligence agencies have it in for Johnson for one reason or another. I mean, it might be because he's so easily blackmailable. I mean, Christ, after he resigned, a recording was released in which he effectively admits that he manipulated an aide of his into a sexual relationship in order to with the promise of a high-ranking job in the city hall when he was mayor of London. I mean, yeah, the intelligence services don't like people that they can't control or indeed are easy for others to control. I mean, they some of the emails that we're due to report on them soon. The Grey Zone, the veteran British journalist who we busted as a kind of British intelligence asset, in conversations with his handler, who is connected to MI6, they are discussing openly, attacking the government and how to go after the Conservatives as if they are Russian. It's very, very strange, and it's like, I mean, whatever you think about the ruling Conservatives, and I mean, if they all got hit by a bus tomorrow, I wouldn't be very sad. But this is a direct breach of the of the Civil Service Code. This is, yes, like direct interference in British in politics by intelligence services using a cutout. This is so underhand and undemocratic and just sleazy. It speaks to a desperation because Mason's British intelligence handler was also heavily involved in Integrity Initiative, which obviously smeared and attacked Jeremy Corbyn and was one of many forces that sought to prevent him from becoming prime minister. And it's like in doing so that they ensured that Boris Johnson was going to enter Downing Street. And so I think that maybe again it was a bargain they struck with themselves, where it's like, okay, right, we'll get rid of Corbyn, get Johnson in, and then we can just try and get rid of him and then replace him with someone who is even more malleable. I mean, Keir Starmer is heavily, I mean, up to his elbows, like proverbially, like with the security services. He's a creature of the British and American national security establishments. I mean, his conduct over Julian Assange when he was in the Crown Prosecution Service was absolutely appalling, and colluded to keep the bogus rape charges against him in Sweden open in order to prolong his suffering in the embassy. And so if he enters Downing Street, they'll have got their guy. But I mean, equally, I'm not sure how likely that is because they have nothing to say on any major issue. There are huge strikes that are breaking out, or if not threatening to break out, all over the UK, which have enormous majority public support, which is a rare thing indeed. They have nothing to say about them. Labour has banned its ministers from attending. It just seems to keep on. They seem committed to continuing to emit this message to to financial backers and vested power that, hey, we're not a threat to you. I mean, again, this just amply underlines how power actually works in Britain and in whose interest it is ultimately exerted. It's not the average citizen.
Is there anything that this change is going to do to affect what's going on in Russia, Ukraine whatsoever? Because it seemed like what we heard, our press secretary over here, Karine Jean-Pierre, she just said it doesn't make a difference who comes in there. We're going to still have strong relationships. We're going to still handle this Russia-Ukraine situation no matter what. So it seems like there's not going to be any change whatsoever. Is there any way that somebody gets elected where we'll see some type of change, a little bit different type of strategy? Because, I mean, it's got to be the citizens of Great Britain.
I mean, I just think that mapping Priti Patel's actions over the course of this year, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, actually the signs that she was running this secret leadership campaign were like fairly obvious. I mean, cut to her, signing off on Julian Assange's extradition to the US, absolutely shocking, opposed by, every leading rights group in the world, pretty much. And subsequent to this, Mike Pompeo flies into the UK, and she has these beaming pictures taken alongside him. And then it's since been revealed that she specifically asked the State Department to issue a public thank you to her for doing it. Like, I mean, I think it's well understood by Britain's ruling elite that, hey, you have to get the Americans on side. We have to butter them up. We can't we can't do anything untoward that might upset them. And yeah, that's, to get to become British Prime Minister, you have to kiss an enormous amount of Washingtonian ass, so to speak. But I think that fundamentally, the US is obviously committed to prolonging this grinding proxy war, and killing as many Ukrainians as possible in the process. Needlessly prolonging this, what's going to almost inevitably be a crushing victory for Russia. And the UK was like a leading light in that. I mean, I think too as well that what Britain and America have attempted to do since the very start of this conflict is try and displace the kind of the political and military significance of France and Germany within the EU. Traditionally, they are the leaders, they're the biggest economies, they're the most influential, and yes, they're trying to undercut now. London and Washington are undercutting them, and they're saying, well, because Germany has been so lackadaisical and slow to actually contribute any of this needless weaponry, then I think that the Baltics, Baltic states and the former Warsaw Pact states, going to have to think seriously about their future security arrangements, i.e., yes, cut out Germany and France. And so there's an enormous number of people benefiting here, but again, the people who aren't benefiting are average citizens, least of all in Ukraine.
So for me, my question is, what could be the impact, let's say, depending on who gets in? Does it change the same way that Pasta was asking about Russia, Ukraine? With Julian Assange's case, you mentioned, of course, of her Priti Patel's decision to extradite Julian Assange. So obviously that wouldn't help him at all if she gets in. But perhaps is there anybody that could potentially be a favorable type of consequence for Julian, or for some sort of semblance of justice for press freedom?
Well, I mean, bear in mind, front runner Rishi Sunak, who was the chancellor, our finance minister for the past two and a half years. He was for much of this time actually an American citizen through a green card, so he didn't have to pay tax. So yeah, I don't hold up much. Energy.
We lost him completely, or
We're losing you a little bit. Hang on a second, we're losing you a little bit. I thought it was me for a second.
Kit's frozen.
Kit, if you want to come back in or refresh it for a second, we'll wait for him to come back in. The internet today is just not cooperating.
It's crazy around the world, fam.
Like, what the hell is happening with this internet? I finally got mine fixed.
I'm going to read some super rays really quick.
Yeah.
All right, so we have one super ray that came through. It is AREM. It is a generous one. Thank you, AREM. You really are amazing. If $250 million can be raised in a single wasted election season, why not fund independent media instead? How long would 250 million carry hundreds of independent journalists? Thank you, Fiorella and Pasta and the real Oz and the rest. It would carry a long way. There was some talk about why the money raised from the NFT with the Julian Assange situation, why in the world they gave some of that money to Ukraine?
Yeah.
When they could have given it to millions of independent journalists.
Yeah, that is definitely something that I think still up for determination. I think a lot of people in the community are questioning that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's
It's
a lot
really
of people
sus.
wondering why it was wasted.
Yeah. And I really wanted to hear him answer that question because speaking of Julian Assange, you know, like that's the thing that I'm wondering about the most. I think the foreign policy is going to stay the same in terms of Ukraine and Russia with whoever gets in, but perhaps there could be somebody that could say, well, we don't want to, you know, that's the US's problem. We're going to, I don't know, like, because Julian is an Australian. So I just don't understand.
Yeah. Why aren't they having, but why aren't they having every day now? Like going, like having press conferences, like look what's going on with the British government. They're falling apart right here at the seams over here. They've just ousted their leader. We cannot, and under any circumstances, go along with this extradition of Julian Assange. Somebody said Storm Belmarsh. You better believe it. I mean, why aren't they out there every day? Every day. We're not seeing enough from the
I agree, fam. I don't
want to say. I don't even know these people. I don't know what the lawyer team is. I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, I think I definitely think there's some.
It's terrible. Every day they should be out there.
Missteps being taken by to say the least, by the defense is what I would call them, the defense. Yeah, there's definitely more. And you know, I want to go to London. Like, I want to go, but it's like impossible to get there right now. It should be like a 3-hour flight, like a 4-hour flight tops, I think. Yeah. And it's like now like a whole day and a half to get there or more, because you have to go back through like the Arab countries and then forward from there. It's a whole mess. It's so complicated. Somebody from RT was telling me, oh, Moscow used to be such a great place to live because you could go all over Europe. You could also go east and it was fine. You could go anywhere. Yeah. And they were like, but now I'm like, yeah, I know. End this damn war already. God, so I could travel.
Well, it's just how much longer can, you know, the West play this bullshit out before, you know, I mean, until there's pitchforks at their gate, that's what they have to experience. Like you saw the fucking goddamn president of Sri Lanka jumping on a naval vessel and getting the hell out of there. I don't think Kit's coming back. I think that was probably it done for him for the day, fam. He might have been jumping back in if he could come back in. I think he's done. So.
Well, he would tell me. That's the thing.
I just think he's having a hard time. Yeah,
maybe he's having a hard time.
He looks like he's having a hard time with his internet. So I don't think that he can even possibly tell you. Who knows?
Yeah, that's weird. The whole internet situation has been weird today, guys. I'm sorry that it's been weird. Okay, I guess we can start in the next section, I guess. But I guess I'll have him on next time to finish up because that was the last question I was going to ask, I think. To be honest, I think that was a quick 20-minute thing. But if you want to just start leading us into the next section.
It's a long section. You ready?
How long?
This is a 45-minute section, unless you want to kick it to the next day. This is a long section.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We should probably just do that because
yeah.
In case he, you know, if Kit comes back, I guess he'll let me know in the next 5 minutes. But if he doesn't, then we can just say bye, guys. Wednesday, Pasta, take us out to what we're supposed to do. We're going to talk about Morocco on Wednesday.
Yeah. It's pretty much everybody experienced it. We saw it all over the social media, but what happened in that exclave. And what an exclave is that.
You mean an enclave?
An exclave, I believe it's called.
Okay. I thought it was an enclave. But.
Let me make sure. I'm going to find out for sure. Hold on one second, everybody. Let me take a look. If it's an exclave or an enclave? Okay. I can't find it. All right. So Spain territory in Morocco proper, if that makes sense. Oz, if we can just pull up the map on page on number 60 real quick. Let's just show you a quick map real quick what's going on, because this is very interesting. What's going on over there? Now you can see with this map over here, this is the map of Northwest Africa. You can see right over there is Morocco. Below Morocco is Western Sahara. Right next to Morocco is Algeria. Almost kissing is Morocco and Spain, right? So if you look at now slide 64, which goes really close to over there, you'll see there are two areas in which Spain, even though it's in proper Morocco, they are Spanish territories. One being in the bottom right-hand corner over there of Melilla, where we saw that awful attack where a lot of African refugees from all over the continent over there were moving there to try to get into Europe. Pretty much, if you get yourself into that territory right there, you are also now in Europe. So then you have European rights. So to get in there as an African citizen, okay, you'll gain some rights as far as your passage into Europe. Same thing if you get to the Canary Islands. What we saw over there was something that was drastic that happened, and there's a whole story of what's going on. I don't want to start because if we start right now, there's too much to explain to get into it. But we will tell you exactly what had happened. Morocco is wanted Western Sahara. They've claimed Western Sahara for quite some time. You can go back to 60, the slide on number 60. You'll see below Morocco is Western Sahara. Now, they've been trying to get recognized by Europe, by the United States, by Israel for this territory. Just recently, the United States recognized Morocco having this territory. Algeria, being a big sponsor and ally of Western Sahara, and the people live there, the Polisario movement, they got really upset by what's going on. So, I mean, there's this whole story of what's going on. It's very geopolitical. There's a lot to do when it comes to oil and gas with Europe and whatnot, claims a certain area, phosphates. The story is just amazing, fam. And it really, to tell you the truth, when I first started hearing it, I was like, get the hell out of here. I mean, there's information about tap phones in one country tapping into another country to hold something over their head. So this is just a crazy, intriguing story. I can't wait to get to it, but it's a lot to unpack. But that's what we'll be talking about on Wednesday. Pam.
Yes. And it's actually the reason there's so much between Morocco and Spain is because a long time ago, the Moroccans went up to Spain and there was that intermingling of cultures, which is why a lot of Spanish words will have Arab. You'll have like a lot of the Arab language in Spanish, in the Spanish Castilian language. And you'll have these, even like the poetry and the people from certain parts of the region of Spain tend to have more Arab blood, like Arab African blood, because they were called the Moors. And so you'll have like these Moorish type of culture. And so you'll see, it's this whole thing with Spain. But I can't wait to discuss it because there's a lot of things involved in that, a lot. So yeah, we'll discuss it Wednesday. Are you going to be on Freedom Fest Friday, fam, or Wednesday too?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is Freedom Fest, but I'm going to be running back between Freedom Fest and the studio to do shows and going back and forth. So I'm going to try to make things happen as best we can.
Okay.
On Friday, we have Garland Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for sure. So we have that going on. By the way, I just want to let everybody know when it comes to Morocco, Morocco is a monarchy. They are ruled by a kingdom. So, you know what I'm saying? It's the royal family over there.
Yeah.
So it's not, an elected government over there. It is a monarchy. But there are so many crazy, interesting things to talk about, and we will get to it on Wednesday.
Yes. And Kid cannot get his internet back up. He just messaged me. So next time we'll bring him back on to finish up the questions. And we'll just cut it short this time. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We'll see you on Wednesday for this section and for more.
All right, guys.
Tomorrow at 4:00, probably like 4:15 or 4:10 Moscow time, which is, I don't even know. It's like 1 o'clock. What am I saying? It's super early in the morning Eastern time. It's like 7 hours ahead of whatever 7 hours before 4 p.m. is. I will be on RT to discuss the meeting between Biden and AMLO. Biden is holding an emergency meeting with AMLO because, AMLO has been speaking out against the West and didn't attend the summit of the Americas. And he has been critical of the Western government and demanded the invitation of Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, has spoken out in favor of Julian Assange. He's talked about nationalizing the energy sources. I mean, he just on and on and on. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation, but I'm going to be on RT to discuss that. That's one of the things I'm going to do this week. So I will see you guys. If you guys want to catch it, I will be there 4 p.m. Moscow time.
All right, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you soon for Pasta Jardula.
Fiorella.
And Oz on those ones and twos.
CONVO out. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.